It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday, we're gonna talk about something difficult, but we're gonna do it with compassion. Again, I am not trying to call anybody out. I am not trying to say anybody's doing anything wrong. This is another thing that is done to men. Um, and what I'm trying to do here is give people things they can do to make their own situations better so you can feel less powerless and have more hope. I shouldn't even say less powerless. You will feel like you have some power in these situations, actively powerful instead of just less powerless, right? We're going to get into positive territory here so that you can feel more confident, more secure, more in control of your own life. And we're talking about relationships with women and whether you actually do fear women or you fear your own vulnerability. That is what are we going to talk about. So if you like this, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. And like and subscribe to this channel as well if you like this content but can't spend money. So this is one of these topics that made me hesitant to get into men's issues in the first place, because conventional wisdom is that this is stuff that's easier for men to hear from other men. But what I found out in talking to men is that that's not necessarily so. That a big part of the shame cycle is other men and a belief that, women are supposed to fix problems. And this is not just something men do to women. This is a myth about romantic relationships that is all pervasive. It happens in, opposite gender relationships. It happens in same gender relationships. Women do it to men. I mean, I honestly believe that the ridiculousness in the romantasy genre right now is that women have basically given up finding partners or even hoping to find partners that are partners. And so they just these books are the equivalent of like 80s action movies where ridiculous stuff goes on, and it's just sort of stupid entertainment. It's not supposed to reflect anything real. So, that's apropos of nothing. Just want to make sure. I'm hesitating because I want to make sure there's plenty of validation off the top here, that this is not something men are uniquely bad at. It just manifests differently in men. The social reality is that there are certain feelings that men are not taught how to feel and process. Same way that there are feelings that women are not taught to feel and process. For women, it's anger. Anytime a woman gets angry, it is shamed and shut down. It is delegitimized as cruelty or manipulation instead of being valid. The feeling itself, not necessarily how you deal with the feeling, but anger is treated as unfeminine. Whereas with men, yes, there are negative consequences to blowing up in anger. And, anger is the big reason that men are associated with anger in a way that women aren't, that I believe that kind of toxic feminist messaging treats men as default predators. And they don't stop and think about this, that anger is something everyone feels. The problem is the menace. The problem is how you handle that anger. But anger can be a masking emotion. And a lot of the reason that men seem to struggle uniquely with anger, even though women struggle with anger plenty and not being able to express it in a healthy way, is that men are not taught how to feel things like fear or sadness these are not considered acceptable emotions. I think a lot of guys are going, yeah, women are allowed to be afraid in ways men aren't. And what do they teach you to do? Now, I was taught this, so I'm unusual. I always found it very unfair that my mother and my sister were allowed to show fear and hide away and run away and slam the door and hide in their room. And I was not allowed to. I was actively punished for being frightened or disappointed or sad. And I remember vividly an example of this when I was 6 years old, but it was so ingrained by then, it started earlier. My dad wanted a boy, so I was going to be the honorary boy, and therefore I was not allowed to feel fear or sadness. All of that had to be aggression and anger, and somebody hits you, hit them back. Be so scary, be so unpredictable that people aren't going to mess with you. Now, it didn't work for my father. He had a ton of social consequences, but he had, just because his father did a cycle of repression and then explosion and repression and scary, angry. So he'd be quiet, withdraw until he couldn't take it anymore, take out the belt, beat the kids, right? And my father thought he was a great parent because he beat the kids less. And we know this. A lot of people are probably going, these are my family dynamic. Now, I got beat a lot more than my sister did because, again, I was the one who was not supposed to be weak. My sister was the girly girl. I was the hope for the family in my father's eyes. And my father he showed disgust when my mother showed fear. But it was like, oh, that's what women do. It was just so weird. I mean, way to screw a kid up. Like, yeah, she's a girl too. But no, she's not the girl because I did not have a son, so she's going to be it. Right? Fucked up shit. But I feel you guys. I have been through this. I have not just read about it. And I had to correct. I got into my teenage years and it was a real problem because by that point, it wasn't girl is acting like boy. It's this bitch is crazy. That's part of the reason I have problems with the word bitch. Not that people are going to stop using it. I just like to talk about it because there are certain words, like take out, certain words against men, like, oh, men are predators. Well, can we put some meat on those bones, please? What are they doing that's predatory? Oh, they're creepy. Well, define creepy. What are they doing that's creepy? If we remove the word creepy, then we actually get into the meat of the complaint instead of just like having this gloss over word where everything stops and you just must change, but you don't know what you're doing, right? And I hear that. I'm afraid of being creepy and or being seen as creepy. And my thought is, okay, if a woman thinks you're creepy, just move on because that is not something that is easy to overcome because creepy, annoying, these are highly subjective things that you can do the exact same thing to another person and they won't feel it's that way at all. Are you doing something, that somebody can explain why it's going to get you a bad result? That you can work with. These general summaries of character, you can't, right? You just can't. There's not enough. You cannot make bricks without clay, to paraphrase Sherlock Holmes, right? So the clay is actually being able to feel and name your feelings. And if you are shamed whenever or shamed or abandoned or stonewalled, I'm looking down because I actually made notes, like a lot of notes for this. And it's a problem because I'm like, where's that thing I put? This is why I don't tend to make a lot of notes. But anyway, if you're stonewalled or shamed or abandoned or even yelled at when you express fear, when you express sadness, any emotion, doesn't have to be those. I'm just going based on trends there. Then you're taught don't say it. And if you go on long enough, don't say it becomes don't feel it. Get angry or withdraw. Those are more acceptable than feeling that feeling. But those are the clay, those feelings that you use to make bricks of good behavior. This is what I do with my client base is overwhelmingly male. And this is what I do. You know, we stop on the feeling first because, like, look, you're doing these things, these behaviors you want to change because the behavior is trying to feed some sort of unmet emotional need. In order to figure out how to change things so you can do better behaviors, we need to identify the unmet emotional need. And we can spend 3-4 weeks just on that. That's why I'm a heck of a lot cheaper than a therapist. But that's important because we can't make the brick of a healthier behavior without the clay of the emotional need. And the idea of male disposability is internalized by a lot of men. Your feelings don't matter. It's internalized by women in a different way, but one of my cats is playing. See, cats are awesome about meeting their needs. My cats don't care. There's 2 of them. It's Lincoln Zelda. I think it's Zelda. Are you Zelda? Yeah, that's Zelda. She doesn't care that I'm recording right now and she's making a lot of noise. She needs to play. She's playing. And that's a very loud toy. I don't think that's actually a cat toy. I think that's a makeshift toy. But she's happy. See? Cat met need. And we talk a lot about women rejecting or invalidating men's feelings. But if we look in male relationships, not romantic ones, friendships, I hear a lot of, well, my friends and I, my buddies and I, we never do apologize to each other. Like, I know he feels bad. I know he's sorry. But do you? You don't. You're guessing. You're inferring. You know, when you're the one that's constantly telling yourself, oh, he's sorry. Oh, mom was sorry. Dad was sorry. They didn't say it. But I know they meant it. This leads to unmet emotional needs. Years and years and years of unmet emotional needs. Because when somebody apologizes to you, when someone acknowledges your feelings, when they even attempt to understand, even if they get it wrong at first, that is a powerful message that you matter just as a person, not just as a producer. And when you are not raised to take these things in, it's like a part of your brain goes to sleep. And it gets less good at receiving those messages of caring, of concern, you know, of validation, of understanding. We talked about this last week. That's part of the reason I decided to do this topic. Men are taught to skip over the most important communications for healing. Now, women are taught sometimes to weaponize them. The idea of a reciprocal apology is one of the most toxic feminine behaviors I have ever encountered. The idea that you say you're sorry for something, and if the other person doesn't say they're sorry for something too, there's hell to pay. Thus making apologies insincere. They don't matter as much. That is just a power game. Instead of, you apologize because you're sorry. And it doesn't matter if the other person's sorry. You apologize as much for you as the other person. Because that is a powerful way of taking ownership instead of blame. Like, you know, I'm sorry I didn't stop and think there before I spoke. You're right. This has upset you before and is a habit for me that I'm going to work to break. But in this case, I went too quick. I forgot that it bothers you. You have told me. I'm sorry. You notice how you apologize for your behavior there and what you're going to do to fix it? And you're not saying, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I made you hurt. No. Don't apologize for another person's feelings. Apologize for what you did. Because that one reminds yourself, like, okay, you're being brave here. You're doing all these things men are supposed to be, right? This is how I come at it. Because raised like boy, issues with vulnerability, right? So if you treat an apology like vulnerability, a weakness, it's going to feel bad. Whereas if you treat it like bravery, which I will go to my grave believing that it is, well, then it's super manly to apologize then, right? I know I'm like Harcourt from Peacemaker. I suffer from some toxic masculinity. I will fucking own it, even though that's the quote from the show. I don't normally use that term because of how it's received. See, there's an example of something I meant no harm by. I know how I use that term. It didn't land well with men. Mansplaining didn't land well with men. So I watched that term, even though I think it's really fucking funny. It doesn't matter. Me getting a brief chuckle is not worth sending the wrong message. And because now I've been told, it sends the wrong message, I'm just gonna man the fuck up and watch that. I'm not gonna expect perfection from myself. I do expect myself to do better. That's how it works. That's the bravery. That's how making change can feel really powerful. That's how I learned to do it. So, if I apologize for something and the other person doesn't, well, you can start going, okay, this person has problems with this stuff and that's notable. But I don't feel like they got one over on me. I don't feel like they tricked me. I owned my behavior and I was accountable without blame. So the apology was easy. What does it say about the other person that it wasn't? Well, there's a lot going on. It can be internalized disposability. It can be fear of weakness. It can be expecting other people to fulfill your emotional needs instead of recognizing that you have to take responsibility for communicating those needs. If you grew up in a home like I did, where not only did you have your father trying to beat you into shape like you were freaking, a blacksmith metal, you had a mother who focused on anticipation of needs. That you were just supposed to know you were supposed to do so. Like there was a sigh or there was a pause and you were supposed to know exactly what you were supposed to do and just jump up and do it. I know a lot of guys are sitting here going, yeah, uh-huh. And so mom just, stormed out of the room in a huff and like shunned and abandoned, which is a form of neglect. And you never really knew what the fuck you did. And then you hear, well, you should have known. And everyone's going, uh-huh. Yeah, that's, women are supposed to be selfless, precious flowers and never say, I need this, because you're supposed to be the emotional experts on all things delicate. And so the idea of going, look, I really need you to do the dishes. Having to do that, women are taught that they failed as women. If they need to ask, if they don't just drop the hanky, or what the heck was it in Westworld, the can of condensed milk? Like, if they don't just drop the hanky and some guy rushes to pick it up because they know they're supposed to, instead of, wow, she's clumsy, you failed as a woman. And that's why you get that big, thing of you didn't do this, you didn't do that. It's really not about you. It's their feeling of failure, which is the way women claim to fear men, but they really fear their own shortcomings, their lack of desirability. Because they're taught that, men primarily want sex, and so they'll be nice to you if they sufficiently want sex from you. And that's really all that it's about. They never really care about you. It's just sex, 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 sex. And so that becomes currency. No shit. This is what women are taught. It is. It's toxic as fuck. But it's all, if a man wants to fuck you, he will be nice to you. Sometimes until he's fucked you once, because you're not good enough for him to want to come back. So then he'll just dump you, And it was that you're not enough. Not that he's shallow or commitment phobic or has poor social skills. Just you weren't enough. You were a 6 instead of a 10, and men only want 10s. There's plenty of messaging like that from women. for women that's very similar to manosphere content. And these messages have been around for hundreds of years, of the keep your legs closed or no man will respect you variety. And the thing is that I wasn't going to talk about this quite yet, but the pull of the manosphere is often that it's the first time that men are given permission to name and feel vulnerable emotions. They'll talk about being frightened. They'll talk about feeling sad. They'll talk about feeling lonely. All the things that there are not social permissions to discuss with not just women, but your male friends. And I mean, God, I've met some very emotionally disconnected gay men because of that mommy issues, plus, the hyper masculinity that sometimes is performed in gay communities. And so there is that, like, it's all about fucking because it's, saying, no, I want someone to love and love me back. Oh God, that's vulnerable. Like, oh, you simp, you sissy, all these things. Like, that gets internalized. It's not just straight guys. And it has to do with what options you were given and what options were denied you. And you're allowed to go, I reject that programming. Yeah, there's going to be social consequences. Trust me. But despite those social consequences, you end up better off. You feel a lot less shame. You're going to have a lot fewer people in your life, but because you're difficult, but hey, we got rid of all the backstabbers and the manipulators, or most of them, and the ones that are better at hiding it, you find out sooner. This is a net positive. And that you'll notice that the people who are trying to ruin me point out, wow, she has a lot of conflict with people. Like, oh, wow, she just dumps her friends. Well, you'll notice I had a really good reason. And the truth is that none of that was true. They actually dumped me. I gave them a choice. You come clean, or we solve this problem, I'm setting a boundary here. Things cannot continue as they are. This is a problem. We need to solve it. And instead of going, yeah, you're right, let's solve the problem, they blew up at me and engaged in personal attacks and then said that was me. It wasn't. Doesn't make it true. And this becomes easier because I know a lot of men are afraid of that reaction, of being falsely accused of, and this is not a blame statement. This is an understanding statement because I had to build these. Your internal boundaries have not been allowed to form if you live in terror. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes being falsely accused of things, right? But if you have better internal boundaries, you can go, well, that might be their sincere opinion. Probably not. They're just saying it because I think it sounds good and it'll stick. Because they've spent too much time on Stalker Chan's blog. But that doesn't make it true. And I know it's not true because here's why. And a lot of the way I treat people is based on the ability to do that. I am intensely fair. That does not always mean nice. Strangely, I have lost people I considered friends over insisting people label links on my Discord server. People blow that up into everything but what you're controlling, you're demanding. No, it's because Discord is terrible about cracking down on things like the check out my indie game link, where there's a click to some sort of file or link and hey, it's a virus, and it took over your Discord and stole all your session tokens in your browser, everything on your computer. It's a nasty one. That's why I do it. I know that's why I do it. A client of mine had that happen to them just 2 weeks ago. That thing is going around again, among other things. I've had 5 phishing attempts on me in the last 3 weeks. And when I called the bank to, because you don't answer when you think it's fishy, you hang up, you call the bank back. They confirmed that was a fake call. And they said, yeah, there's been a lot of these lately. And it's just people trying to ransom $100 to $300. There's a lot of that going around right now. And so that's why I do it. People make up ridiculous, selfish, evil motivations to that. Oh, you like to bully people. Oh, you're completely unqualified to deal with people with profound autism. Really? Clear instructions are not good for autistic people? I was actually accused of that because we asked people to label their fucking links. People come up with some baffling shit. Doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it true. And it's okay to hurt when somebody you thought was a friend chooses to vilify you like that, or a loved one, instead of giving you the benefit of the doubt. It does hurt. But if you have those more solid internal boundaries, you don't have to live in terror of it. Hence the name of this video. Are you afraid of women or your own vulnerability? Right? It is possible to shore up some of those internal vulnerabilities, because we don't talk about this enough, but women who claim they're afraid of rape and things like that, guys, real talk, it's not really about that. It's about being used and thrown away. And you feel violated when somebody does that to you. You do. It feels like an assault. It feels like a violation. We in our minds know that men who abuse or, men who rape are relatively rare. But it's an acceptable thing to say. Because if you just go, look, I'm afraid of getting used and thrown away, all you get is keep your legs closed. Right? We all know this. Or maybe you guys don't because you don't talk to enough women, candidly. But with men, it's the same thing. It really is. It's not just a fear of rejection. You're starved for validation. And if one more person actively invalidates you, you're not sure you're going to be able to deal with it. And why I look at, well, how did your male role models behave? When you were vulnerable, did they shame you? Did they abandon you? Did they stonewall you? This matters. Sometimes you really got to look at yourself and going, are you relying completely on women for stuff you wouldn't dare want from other men? You wouldn't expect other men to give you this kind of emotional validation, because that's not just what men do. Not what men do. Remember I said, me and my buddies, we never apologize to each other. We just know they're sorry. You don't really know. You're assuming. And you don't really know that person hates you. You're assuming. Really watch the assumptions. A lot of men walk around with this core belief that they're not understood, that their interests are vile, and if they're their full true selves, people will reject them. They'll reject them and they'll mock things that are really important to them. And that feels terrible. But the fact that it feels universal indicates it's not just about women. Because let's face it, if you got a real solid group of friends that do accept your interests, do accept your framing, and a woman comes along and goes, ew, nerd, next. I mean, shit. It's amazing to me how many guys shame that stuff in women. No, really, not you guys. I know you guys are cool. But for so many, it's considered unfeminine to like a lot of the stuff I do. The weird looks. Elden Ring is weirdly acceptable, when I talk about some of the games I play, like people are like, when I talk about really liking Yakuza, if they've even played it, they're like, what? It's just believe that women don't like this stuff. And so when you do like this stuff, you're weird and kind of gross. No, really. I mean, for me right now, that I've talked about the hilarious reaction to the sports I like. That's anomalous with a lot of my friends, but okay, that's okay. They like that I like it. You know, I got my husband hotel shirt on right now. We can still be cool with that, right? And so, you know, if you've spent your life just assuming that guys don't apologize to each other, that's gay. You know, that's just an example. But it becomes this like those expectations turn off, right? Those sensors in the brain looking for it turn off. And everything gets dumped onto this dream of a romantic relationship with a single person who will complete you. And it's especially bad with, you know, some of these, because romance tends to be about anticipating needs and this idea that this one person will come along that will overcome all your self-invalidation. I mean, Twilight was the biggest example of this. Like that book, you know, the brain itch. Because like, oh, Bella knew that Edward would never be interested in her. He'd never do it. Of course, we all know what's coming. And to me, that's fucking bad writing. No, she didn't know. She assumed. She couldn't possibly have known because all the while he really liked the way she smelled. And that's the basis for a really solid relationship where, you know, she goes through all this physical pain and eventually she gets turned into a vampire at the end. I think so. Something like that. But, you notice I blanked on it because I don't care. Because when you get to the point, oh, she knew he'd never. Well, if she actually knew, there'd be no plot. 4 books would not have happened. But these are the sorts of things where, you know, media doesn't have to teach good habits. People like that book because, yes, that's how I think. And instead of going, this is a false assumption, it's like, oh, I feel understood by the toxic elements of this story. I really do believe that sort of thing is keeping people stuck, but they have no hope for better, so it doesn't matter. And, you know, if people have no hope, they're not going to take risks to make things better. Because what's the point? They're stupid risks. It's never going to happen. I know it's never going to get better. Don't be fucking Bella Swan, guys. Question your assumptions, right? So by the time we get to manosphere content that is treated as the source of this bad code, the manosphere feels right to certain guys because that element of social media just reinforces the more direct influences, the things that seem normal, you know, mom anticipating needs, insisting you anticipate her needs, dad shutting down when you try to talk about feelings, friends thinking feelings are gay, you know, and that's even worse when you think you might be gay because being gay is used as an insult, right? And that's getting better in some pockets, worse in others, but still, it's that shunning, stonewalling, shaming, abandoning that you get when you try to express your feelings. There is anybody in your formative years who tells you it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad. You know, let's mentor you on how to deal with these difficult emotions. It is a very different ballgame. And I'm recording this on Friday. That metaphor could be very different depending on the outcome of Game 6 and 7 of the World Series. But being given permission in your formative years to feel vulnerable emotions is game-changing. Now, if you didn't, there's still hope, right? You can work with the people around you, and this is something that real people like me, real communities can do that a chatbot can't, as agreeable as they are. Because you know at the end of the day, that's a bot. That's not a real person. So it temporarily feels better, and then you feel silly for feeling better because it's not real. But people do that with other people. Oh, she's just being nice. Oh, she doesn't really know me. If she knew me, she'd hate me. No, the person in that moment probably means it because, like I said, compliments are vulnerable. But if your brain has switched off its ability to detect validation, detect compliments, you're not even seeing it. I will stop clients and say, did you hear I just validated you? Did you hear I just complimented you? And they'll explain to me why it didn't count. And I'm sitting here going, okay, I see the problem here. Because instead of just going, yes, you did, it's, well, that's about something I am, not something I did. Or, well, I'm paying you to say that. It's like, no, you're not paying me to say that. You're paying me to listen, but I'm not paid per compliment. You're taught to dismiss these things. So you may be getting a lot more validation than you actually think. Your brain has just been taught to go to sleep about them. I'm not saying it's true. You could have an incredibly invalidating experience. And I'm telling you, you deserve better. Why do you deserve better? Because every human being does. Every human being deserves to have people around them that acknowledge their good qualities. And those good qualities don't just disappear or completely flip because somebody is angry or disappointed in them. You know, one of the things that people attack is my kindness. And because I spent a lot of years in therapy having to resist that urge to give people chance after chance after chance, not just because I had low self-esteem and shitty boundaries, but because I do, when another person's hurting, I hurt. When another person is suffering, if there's something I can do, I'm going to do it. So when people accuse me of the opposite of kindness, if they accuse me of being deliberately cruel, which was a friendship-ending accusation because the guy wouldn't stop, I know that's not true. And I know that's either somebody ironically being cruel to manipulate me into doing something they want me to do or stop doing something they don't want me to stop doing, or they truly believe it. And quite frankly, that's worse because that's not me and something's very wrong there. But if you're more worried about maintaining your friend count because of the optics of having friends means something, instead of friends who are really there for you, taking a quality of friendships approach instead of a quantity, then yeah, you're gonna feel constantly vulnerable because you feel unsupported, you feel invalidated, and all this is valid. Now, what you do about it is a completely different video, and actually it's not great for a video because there's too many possibilities. This is why I offer one-on-one work. But feeling those difficult feelings is vulnerable. And if you're afraid of vulnerability, and if you've been, raised, there's nothing wrong with wanting approval from women. Absolutely nothing wrong. Feminism is fucking wrecked that. There's nothing wrong with Mario wanting a kiss on the cheek from Princess Peach and thinking that means, hey, he did a good thing because she gave him a kiss on the cheek. Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly healthy. That's not women as reward. That's a woman's affection as reward. And that's fine, right? But it shouldn't be transactional. Somebody should have affection for you, even when they're angry at you, even when they're sad, even when they're disappointed. And if they don't respect, stop saying that, please. It's not true. You deserve better. Now, how to get better is really complicated, and we're already at the 40-minute mark, but it's true. It's okay to feel your feelings. Please name your feelings. And you deserve friends who will be there for you when you go, I'm sad, I'm scared. Now, keep in mind, it's much harder for them to be there for you when you blow up and lash out before you say that, because then they're like, right? It's better to say it before the big emotional pop. It's better to say that before you've name called. Like, this is common sense. And yet the training often overrides common sense. Because again, if you think your feelings are going to be rejected no matter what you do, there's no hope to allow you to express that negative emotion before it got too much and you exploded. There's gotta be that hope. And I'm telling you, you deserve that hope because every human being does. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone can use it but can't afford it, where we work out things like this, coffee.com/LeannaK. Also, like and subscribe to this channel. That helps too. Thanks for watching. Manly Monday.